it's usually that you thought the worst of them. We usually think the worst of people, not the better. And when the whole situation plays out, you realize you made a mistake. Yes, that's me. You misjudged someone. You thought you understood their intentions and their words. And misunderstandings can be really painful. They really can in our relationships. Now, human-to-human interaction is one thing, right? That's difficult enough at times. But what about when the interaction is with God? How much more likely are we to misunderstand God himself? Do you ever think you have misjudged God? That at times you've failed to understand his intentions, his actions, or his character? Sonia and I have been on a journey over the last about 6 years, and a faith journey. And not that we've been following Jesus a lot longer than 6 years, but the last 6 years have been pretty cool. The things we have been learning and growing in have revolutionized our faith. The Bible has become exciting again. The weird things in the scriptures start to make sense. Not all the time, sometimes. Faith in a God who will make all things new is transformational. I'm not saying we're some sort of super Christians, far from it, but only that the journey has become very redeeming for us. And there's that word, redeeming our image. I'm not sure if I'm preaching today or just teaching. We'll kind of see what happens. Today I'm going to speak about our image. And by image, I mean what is true about us at the very core of our beings. So, what is our true nature? What is true about us at the very core as humans? And I'm going to ask for your thoughts. Give me some ideas. What's true about us at our very core of our being as humans? Anybody? Imperfect? Yeah. Need love? Yeah. Good. Anybody else? Put you on the spot?
Made in God's image.
Made in God's image? Yeah. We're going to get there today for sure.
Creation.
What was that?
Creation.
Yes. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Thanks. Some good thoughts there. What about sin nature? Nobody threw that one out. I'm going to... Yeah, we'll get there too. So let's go to the beginning. At the front of the Bible is a book called In the Beginning, Genesis. And if you want to find out the origins of who we are, this is a great place to start. I don't want to say Genesis is one of my favorite books because it gets really strange in places, but the creation story is pretty interesting. So here we have the creation account, Genesis 1. And I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's going to take too long, and we don't need to read the whole thing. But so first, God creates the light, and then the Bible says, God saw that the light was good. Great. Then he created the sky and land. Again, it says, and God saw that it was good. He created the plants, and again, God saw that it was good. The sun, the moon, the stars. Are you picking up a pattern here? God saw that it was good. God's on a roll. He's really on a roll. He created the birds, sea animals, land animals, and again it says God saw that it was good. There's a reason this is repeated, right? And then I have the first slide up here. This is Genesis 26. There we go. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in his image. The image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. And guess what it says next? God saw everything that he had made, and indeed, it was very good. Very good. So I think Genesis is kind of giving some truth about who we are. We are made in God's image. Can't argue that one. That one's right out of there. This is really big. This is really big. And I'm going to try and unpack a little bit about what that means as I get into this message. But what else does the passage say about us? When God created everything, it was good. But when he created humans, it was very good. This tells us something about the core of who we are as humans. Did God create evil or sin? If he did, we have a problem here because everything he created was good. God did not create sin or evil. I submit to you that we were not created with a sin nature. Otherwise, God would have not have called us very good. Let me put it in a different way. Are we sinful or are we sinners? There's a difference here between sinner by nature and sinful in our actions. So let's talk about what it means to be made in God's image. We are made in God's image. Interestingly, the word here is the same word as idol. Not American Idol, but like the idol that the Israelites were instructed never to make, never to worship. Yeah, idol. Isn't that a strange one? So why was Israel forbidden to make any kind of idol? Because an image of God already exists, us, right? We are made in God's image. No other idols needed. Leave them at the door. When I was a bit younger in my faith, I wondered, what does this made in God's image stuff mean? I mean, does God have a face? Does he have two eyes? Does he enjoy a good movie? I think most of us tend to think about this in a metaphysical way. For example, God is creative, he's kind, he's good, he has a will, he is spirit. In the same way, we can be creative. We have the capacity to make decisions, to do good, and have a spiritual component of our being. These are all really good reflections on what it means to be made in the image of God, but a better way to answer this question, at least from Genesis, is to go back to the text. Always referring to the context of the scripture is the most faithful interpretation of the passage. So then, I'm going to read this again and just add a little bit more to it, back to Genesis 26. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea." There we go. I've highlighted the word dominion. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over all the created things. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Verse 28. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." Verse 29, God said, "See, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit, you shall have them for food." It's pretty obvious. We see the creation of man and woman in these verses, and then some kind of hierarchy being established between humans and everything else, all the animals and plants and everything, creeping things. And we also see that humans were given a job, a purpose. So I'm no Near Eastern scholar, but from what I've heard about the Genesis creation account is that if you were an ancient reader or ancient audience of Genesis, you would have understood that God is being depicted as a king. As a king. He speaks, then it happens. For ordinary people, when I say something, especially if it's my kids, it may or may not happen, right? Going even further than that, if I speak, it's not going to happen. I don't have a whole kingdom of people doing my will, right? So God is depicted as a king in this passage. Now, this is important when we are given our purpose. We are told to have dominion over creation, to fill the earth and subdue it. Other translations say rule over creation. This is all royal language. Have dominion, rule, subdue. So humans are actually described as co-rulers in this passage along with God. How's that for being made in the image of God? What this passage is describing is that we are image bearers in the purpose that God has given to us. Now, before too many eyebrows get raised here, God is not telling us that our purpose is to go out and conquer the world or make war or cut down all the trees. Although mankind has tried this and still continues to do this. Rather, the context of this passage is more along the lines of cultivating a garden and establishing human civilization. So the purpose of humans, as seen in this passage, is to do what God has been doing, creating, giving order, and making life flourish. That's a pretty noble purpose. An important idea, switching gears just a little bit here, an important idea to understand is the difference between the truth of your being and the way of your being. I'll explain that. It's maybe confusing. The truth of your being is what is true of you at your very core. For example, you were created in the image of God. You can't reverse that. It's true of you at the core of your being. Now, the way of your being is how you think and act. And we get into a little problem here because the way of our being does not always match the truth of our being. Or to say it in a different way, we do not always bear God's image that well. And if you just want to look in the news headlines, you can see that, right? In fact, sometimes we're pretty terrible at bearing God's image. And I don't mean this just personally of each of us, but as humanity, we've done a pretty bad job, I think, at bearing God's image. So part of my journey has been relearning who I am and also relearning who God is. Now, for some of us, our experiences falsely shape what we think the truth of our being is. I'm going to say that again. For some of us, our experiences falsely shape what we think the truth of our being is. If my dad told me every day that I'm always screwing up, I might start to believe that I'm a screw-up and I can't do anything right. Even going a little darker into this, if I was abused, I might believe that there's something deeply wrong with me, that I'm unlovable, and that I have no real value as a person. Now, none of this is true, of course, but our experience colors our identity. My father, by the way, was a very good father. I'm just making an example, and I had a very good upbringing. So what I did find harmful in my faith journey, it was the lies that I believed about God, and along with that, the lies that I believed about myself. And let me tell you, I'm going to get into hot water here, but there's a lot of theology, even in mainstream Christianity, that is just plain bad theology. And I don't want to get stuck in the weeds here, but tell me if you have heard any of these ideas before. I'm not worthy. I'm totally depraved. Jesus saves me from God's wrath. God punished his son Jesus on the cross. Taking this a bit further, God punished Jesus in our place. We deserve to be hung on the cross. Terry mentioned this one last week. When Jesus was dying on the cross, God the Father abandoned Jesus. This one, I really like this one. God accepts me because when he looks at me, he doesn't see me, he sees Jesus. Now, try this one on your next date. Oh, honey, when I look at you, I don't see you. I see Natalie Portman. Yeah. See how that goes for you. God is merciful and just. Yes, I agree with that. Because his justice needs to be satisfied, he cannot forgive without punishing someone. God needed a blood sacrifice in order to appease his wrath. And I need to behave so God will love me. When you hear these things, you might get the idea that God is angry, retributive, even a bit unfair. And really, he's got this fixation on punishment. Like, what's with that? Why does he want to punish me? It gets really confusing when we hear contradictory statements like, God's love is unconditional. God died for you. You are made in the image of God. God is love. God is a loving Father. The problem I have found with many of these contradictory statements is that if we applied them to our own life, they wouldn't make a lot of sense. They almost get absurd. So, as a loving father, would I tell my daughter, if she made a mistake, that she should be punished, or even worse, that she deserved to die for her mistake? But luckily for her, I found a substitute that I could punish instead of her. And that's going to make it better, right? This doesn't sound like a loving father or like unconditional love. So, if only we had like a physical demonstration of God's image, like if God came down in the flesh. Thank God for Jesus, right? Jesus redeems our broken image of God and of ourselves. There's no contradiction in God's love or his character or his actions. When we see Jesus, we see the Father. I have a few more verses here. Jesus said in John, I and the Father are one. John 14, from now on, you will know my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Jesus was standing in front of people saying this. You've seen the Father. Whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise. So if you have seen Jesus, you have seen the Father. Jesus reveals the true character and activity of God. When we look at the life of Jesus, we don't see an angry, retributive God. So now we have, I love this, is one of my favorite parables. Now we have the picture of the Father with open arms, welcoming his derelict son. This is the story of the prodigal son in Luke 15. The father could have required some penance from his wayward son. He could have been angry and taken his fury out on some unwitting servant. But no, this is not the character of the Father. Instead, there's a party for the lost son's return. This is pretty surprising. We've heard this parable a lot of times, but it's a pretty surprising sort of reaction to the son coming home. What about justice? Did the son have to pay for his wrongdoings? What about punishment? It's absent from the story, except maybe in the older brother. So the son came back, and he was, if you're familiar with the parable of the prodigal son, he was ready to give his practice speech to his dad. He said, Father, he's reciting this to himself, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands. So he's got this practiced speech in his head, and the son, he starts to say this, and he doesn't even get the chance to finish it because the father embraces him, and he starts reinstating him. And notice this, if you read the parable, the father completely rejects his son's false belief about himself, that he was no longer worthy to be called a son. The truth is that he is a son, a loved son, and his wayward actions did not change this truth. The way of his being, all the bad stuff he did, could not erase the truth of his being. Just as an interlude here, the zebra played the xylophone quickly. If you don't get that, don't ask. Yeah, the zebra played the xylophone quickly. So I started off this message talking about the image of God. We are made in that image. That's pretty cool. This is the truth of our being. And do you know who else is described as the image of God? Jesus. I've got some more scriptures here, I think. Did I make a slide? Yeah, here we go. From Colossians, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. And in Hebrews, I love this one. He is the reflection of God's glory and the exact imprint of God's very being. That's great Christology there. I think it's pretty cool that both the first Adam and the second Adam were made in the image of God. The first Adam we know from the Genesis account, Adam and Eve, and Adam means humankind, right? It wasn't a dude there named Adam. I think it is talking about the condition of all humankind. We are the first Adam, so to speak. So that first Adam represents all of us. The second Adam is Jesus. Jesus is the one that brings completion to us, the one who brings healing and restoration. I love this verse. Next slide. Yeah. For by a single offering, we're talking about Jesus offering himself on the cross. For by a single offering, he has perfected for all time those who are sanctified. Hebrews 10:14. Perfected for all time. So, is this statement from Hebrews, is this about the truth of our being? Or is this about the way of our being? If we look at it in that framework, it's a statement about the truth of our being. What is true about us at the very core as believers is that we have been perfected for all time, past tense. A little comment on the word perfect. When the Bible uses perfect, in our regular use, we think it means to do something without making any mistakes. There's nothing wrong with something. In the Bible, the word perfect means more like whole or fulfilled, or it has integrity. So there is no misalignment or contradiction in Jesus. The way of his being, remember we talked about that, and the truth of his being was like a math equation, equals, There was no contradiction. The way of his being matched the truth of his being. He was complete. He was complete. And this, of course, has a bearing on our situation, right? Where we have been poor image bearers of God, and Jesus is the complete image. Where the truth of our being does not match the way of our being, Jesus has redeemed our image. I've talked long enough. It's time to close this off, and I'll give the worship team a little advanced warning to come up. I don't want to presume where you're at. We're all at different places in life. My hope is that there is something in what I've said today that can be helpful. Like I said earlier, some of the ideas have been transformative for my faith and have given me a real confidence in God. Like I can trust his character. He's not angry at me. He doesn't wish to punish me. When the whole COVID debacle happened, I hate even mentioning that word, but as a family, of course, we were affected. But overall, we were not afraid. Annoyed and angry, yes, but not afraid of death or sickness. And this verse from Hebrews, I don't have a slide for it, I don't think. It was really instrumental. Our confidence was in the God who triumphed over death and freed us from being slaves to the fear of death. That was pretty moving for me during COVID. Like, I don't have to really be a slave to the fear of death anymore. So to summarize everything, we are made in the image of God, and when God created humans, he said it was very good. One of the ways that we are made in the image of God is the purpose God has given us to be co-rulers over creation. I love that. It's very noble. Jesus is the true image of God, the most complete revelation of who God is. If we want to know the Father, just have a look at Jesus. And we don't always reflect God's image well by our actions and thoughts, but the life of Jesus shows us how to do this. Yeah. So we're going to celebrate communion today. And when Pastor John asked me, "Oh, would you like to do communion while I'm away?" I'm like, "Yes, I would." So I'll ask the helpers to come up. That would be very, very awesome. And there we go. So one thing that I found really interesting or meaningful is that